Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inspiring Careers. My name is Dan Johnston, and I'm here today with another fantastic guest. His name is Lee Finlan. He's an MSL director for Europe, and he most recently won in 2014 the Pharma Times MSL of the Year competition. He came in bronze place, and that was the very first MSL of the Year competition that had happened in the world. Good afternoon, Lee. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Dan. Good afternoon.
Cool. Lee, let's get straight into it. So you work currently as an MSL director in Europe for Halozyme, and what I want to ask you is, as well as winning the MSL of the Year 2014, what other awards have you won? Have you come across in-house awards, or were there any other awards that were being presented elsewhere that you came across?
Yes, so during my time when I worked with Genzyme, I was fortunate enough to win individual awards, but also part of team awards for the UK affiliate for the work we did with multiple sclerosis, really driven around safety for patients, and that was recognised by the company. And then I joined Baxalta, which was a new pharmaceutical company, launching a company as well as new products in oncology. And I was awarded a global recognition award for some of my efforts around kind of conference engagement, etc., as well as medical reporting.
Excellent. So I'll ask you that my first question. We'll get straight into it. Lee, what I want to ask you is, what are you most passionate about when it comes to the MSL role? And you can answer that whether it's being an MSL itself or being an MSL director. What makes you most passionate about this particular field of work?
Ultimately, I was a bench scientist for about 12 years, and what I found so intriguing about the role was the opportunity to really use your communication skills, ultimately to get closer to be really helping patients out in the development of medicines. So medical liaisons have a really kind of key role in an area where there's a need for scientific communication to bring it down to a level of understanding from different stakeholders or parties, business people, medical people, all the way to nurse education, etc. So I just felt very passionate about that, and obviously I'm highly research interested in the development of medicines, and medical liaisons act as diplomats in making things like that happen, especially sometimes during the medicine's development process, but also after medicine's license. There can be additional uses for medicine in different diseases, which a medical liaison can potentially facilitate. So I like the diplomacy, and I like the communication, and ultimately you're helping to drive innovation forward.
That's fantastic. So it's really, just to kind of summarize that, you're sitting in the middle between patient, doctor, stakeholder, and it's just that you get that kind of real joy, real passionate about being able to present that information differently to each audience, and effectively as well, so they understand it as clear as they can.
That's exactly right, and the other part of it is the way that you're communicating it is very much from a scientific medical aspect. Safety first, responsibility for the company, your integrity. You're not asked to do anything which would be considered unfair or imbalanced or scientifically incorrect. And I think that's the key substrate which a medical liaison works. But ultimately, you have to be a people person. You have to be friendly and have that ability to listen with two ears and speak with one mouth, to really gain that type of relationship, which is going to stand the test of time with healthcare professionals above and beyond, kind of one meeting. It's going to be a relationship or a partnership which you're going to try to develop over time.
And I guess that's one of the kind of key skills, really, isn't it? It's the ability to listen more than to talk, even though you've got all this great information that you want to share. I'm guessing it's much more about listening to what your audience wants to communicate to you equally as much.
It absolutely is. I think listening is being critical and having the ability to keep that information in your head, because sometimes you can't describe all the time. So you have to be able to really hold on to that information and then be able to communicate that accurately kind of downstream. Another key aspect is asking the right types of questions in the right type of situation and circumstance. And sometimes less is more as well, giving some space for people to really think and then elaborate. And sometimes you get a lot more information, whereas if you ask very close questions, sometimes you can get a very close answer.
Okay, and again, you might have answered this, but since moving from an MSL position to a much more senior position in management and directorship, and as I said, for you as well, you manage a European region. What would you say is the most you're most passionate about when it comes to being a director within this role?
What I'm most passionate about is working for a biotechnology company, which again is focused in oncology. We're at the stage where we are supporting a clinical development program. And from a medical liaison perspective, what we're doing is dynamically representing the key science in support of that clinical program, so that there's a greater awareness of the type of kind of pathology it's targeting to facilitate greater drug delivery. A key aspect of why that is important is the science is often overlooked. So we're working in conjunction with an operational team as the medical kind of counterpart for them. We also deal with a lot of scientific questions and queries and stuff which is related to the protocol, where there might be grey zone. So we act as a diplomat in that. So you're facilitating in real time a drug which has not truly been robustly characterized at that time. So you're helping to develop something, but you're also helping to guide the path of clinicians to get more familiar with this medicine as they're stepping into the unknown, so to speak. So most of them have got little experience. So there's a key aspect of that where it is truly fascinating, huge project, where you require really highly skilled kind of people who know science, who know the protocol, and ultimately know the study. And I think that's where I feel very, very privileged to be involved in that type of story, that type of dynamic. And the other side of it is in relation, as I said, to research ideas, which is not company driven. They might be sponsored by a company, but they're not the ideas or intellectual property of the company. But you might be able to facilitate that. That's a program, an aspect where I found great traction with biomarkers, which are important, with different drug combinations and the kind of pan-tumor potential for therapeutics of synergizing with medicines, and that made us find it completely fascinating, and it relates to the science aspect as well as facilitating that, because you ultimately have to discuss with the people who will make funding decisions that it's strategically a good idea to collaborate on.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. You get a real responsibility and a real influence in your marketplace. And I can see why that can get anyone fired up, particularly when it's, when we've got science backgrounds. We can get very into that. That sounds amazing. What I want to ask you then is, what is one of the toughest problems that you have faced in your current role? And how do you think it could be solved?
So in my current role, I'm not quite so sure in my current role. I'd like to talk about an example of, as you're going from being an MSL, senior MSL, to ultimately becoming a manager or more senior, where you're looking after and leading teams. I think one of the key aspects where I face some difficulties and challenges is that when you have ideas and when you have passion, you really need to establish that relationship with people who share that type of energy, that type of optimism. Sometimes you're not at the right company at the right time. You can face barriers because you can be your energy to drive positive change, which is of benefit to the company, to your team, to yourself, and ultimately to patients. Can sometimes be perceived or misconstrued, and you can be seen as a go-getter who wants to get ahead, and can ultimately, you can be labelled and branded a little bit as a threat. And I think that's sometimes an area where, if I reflect upon my past, how do you manage and how do you deal with that in the right way to try and overcome those barriers? And that there can be different solutions. That sometimes just being patient, or putting ideas out and letting people take those ideas as their own, and ultimately developing a relationship is the right way. Sometimes you might not be at the right company, and I think that's where you need to consider: are you feeling valued? And thereby consider job hopping. Go to another project with a new team where you might have impetus, where you not necessarily have those barriers to you feeling fulfilled and ultimately satisfying some of your career goals as well, and thereby delivering on some of those key things which you're passionate about. Because where you're passionate about, you tend to work 2 or 3 times harder than when you're dispassionate, and I think that's really, really key. So never be afraid to, if you're facing certain barriers and you feel that you're really not going to break that kind of cycle, consider kind of much as new, because there's so many exciting projects out there, and keeping an open mind is really, really critical. I used to in the UK, in Europe, and I've never looked back from embracing that type of dynamic and having a different philosophy from other European partners come into your kind of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the key things I'm getting from your answer there is it sounds like your environment, whether that be work environment, culture, and the actual very people around you, is probably one of the most single important factors that can really make a big difference to your career, whether you're looking for promotion or just looking to expand on the experience you already have. If that environment is more competitive but in the wrong way, i.e. You mentioned earlier about people seeing your ideas and your input and your work ethic as more of a threat than more of a way of bringing everyone forward. That can obviously be quite sour and can really, I don't want to say necessarily hold you back, but it can really get in the way of progress. Whereas an environment that is positive and contributing and everyone's got the best interest of both the patient, wanting to really do a good job for the key opinion leaders, the stakeholders, and as well as each other as well. A real team that wants to build each other up. That's going to make a huge, huge difference to your career. Would you be
absolutely? I mean, it's a bit of Darwinian kind of philosophy. It's those that can adapt are those which thrive, survive, and progress. And I think if you feel like you're a yes type of character, in a very no type of environment, you're not necessarily going to thrive in that type of domain. And I think that's really, really important to recognise. And if these people, if that's shaped by people's thinking, people's thought processes, and truly not wanting to share that passion, that's the way that it happens. But I think more and more, as the industry has evolved and changed over the last 10 or 15 years, you can clearly see where it's going. It's going in an innovative direction, and medical affairs is seen as an absolute key priority of that. So I'm very pleased about that, and feel like I am in the right type of place. With the type of companies that I've worked for over the last kind of 3 or 4 years. Genzyme were fantastic to work for, and Baxalta were also they were built out within about 10 months, and Halozyme are an incredible company to work for as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had an incredibly a wonderful experience with some great companies and great teams, and you can see that from the way you talk as well. You seem so enthusiastic and so passionate, a way you bring across your message. So that's absolutely brilliant. Okay, so my next question for you then: what has been your most favourite career achievement? What do you look back on and think, yes, that was absolutely brilliant, and you feel really good about?
I think the one which I think was really, really compelling and stood out for me was when it came to Pharma Times being acknowledged and going to the final for that. Why that occurred, I was recommended by several healthcare professionals, both nurses and clinicians, And the reason why was because of the approach which I took. I was involved in a team and in a project where it was a drug which was highly efficacious, but it also some very significant safety risks which you needed to mitigate and manage against. And the medical liaison team was the team to increase awareness and to support programs to monitor patients, to put safety first and to put familiarity and confidence of knowing how to use that medication at the forefront of the project launch. The medicine was being launched, and just before launch, we were doing that. And, there were 3 or 4 incidents where the medical liaison work clearly affected outcomes of patients in terms of safety events, where the events were picked up early, they were mitigated and managed, and ultimately the patient reaped the benefit. So it kept the risk-benefit profile drastically in favour of the therapy and continuing with that therapy for the patient. That's an incredible feeling. When you clinicians and nurses are really thanking you for your work, it makes you feel very, very humble. So that's what led to the Pharma Times Award, and ultimately I represented that first as safety is sexy. That was my strategy for the Medical Science Liaison kind of a few years ago, and everything which I represented there was not focused on the mode of action or this drug is so great. It was focused on it has compelling efficacy, but what I want to talk to you about is the safety aspect and show the responsibility on the side of that. And that's very good for a company's reputation. It's very good for the industry at large, and ultimately it's very satisfying to be able to have a sincere and frank conversation where you're not avoiding talking about controversy. You're saying, hey, this can be managed. You're medical professionals, and we want to do is to support you in that, and it fosters a confidence. So that for me was a hugely eureka moment for me, where I felt medical affairs is where it's at. If you are truly in the right company where they are research interested, they have ethics and they want to do things correctly,
Brilliant. Yeah, and I love that phrase, safety is sexy. I'm definitely not going to forget that anytime soon. Sounds like a brilliant presentation. And but no, you're absolutely right. And again, what I get there is how having real integrity in your role. Now, I don't work as a medical science liaison, but I can imagine that maybe there are some situations out there where people are more pressured to always kind of talk up their drugs, or not have the harder discussions, not talk about the controversies and all the rest. But actually, when you approach from the viewpoint of, okay, who does this come down to? This comes down to the safety of the patient. If we're talking about safety first, then the doctors will come out looking, on top of their game and looking really good. And likewise, I bet it does a lot more for the reputation of MSLs across all companies when everyone is working to that kind of integrity and that kind of standard. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I would say that, if you take care of the safety, it is a business driver which will stand the test of time, versus let's avoid safety and focus on short-term kind of business goals. If you really lay a solid foundation with that, the familiarity begets confidence, and that begets additional adoption of medicines. Whereas if people are safety concerned and afraid because they've had a bad experience because they were not well prepared, it's only a lose-lose threat for everyone in that particular aspect. But ultimately, it comes down to principally to a philosophical position of how medical affairs works and how it looks to engage. And that's why I think it does adopt well to other areas of medical practice in new medicines being launched, and ultimately how information is communicated out as part of the risk minimization programs which are now mandated by the European Union.
All right, next question. So again, what's the number one thing that you see that is holding other MSL directors or other senior MSLs back from being truly successful?
I think there's a few things. I think we talked about job hopping earlier on. I think I've seen many senior medical liaisons who've been established with one company for a long time in big pharma, and they have lots of money and they do have certain programs which they want to execute and operate. And no discredit to that. That's absolutely fine. What can often happen is that you can become kind of institutionalized if you've only seen one company with certain types of strategies. I've been fortunate enough to work for two big pharma companies, quite a few medium-sized and also small pharma companies. And what you actually can find is sometimes in the smaller companies, they have to be more innovative because they have less resource in terms of funds or sizes of their teams. What comes with that innovation ultimately can be really, really refreshing in terms of new ideas, new ways to engage, etc. One of the biggest barriers is that people get comfortable in that, and ultimately when they do, come to another company, they just want to reinvent big pharma in a smaller environment, and that's often a barrier because people can come in with very good reputations and with high expectations, etc. And within 6 months, it can come undone. And the reason is because they've not adapted to the new environment. They've not learned. They've just looked to kind of recapitulate what was good practice in big pharma. And I think that is a key area where when people make the transition, being more mindful of that is it's important. Pick your winners. Some of the stuff big pharma does is great, but some of it just will not work in that role. I would say it's not about metrics. Metrics are important. If you're not active and out there, then you're no use to anyone, either healthcare professionals, patients, and also the company. But it's about the quality of the engagement and the quality of the projects, which as a medical team, you're going to execute yourself, but ultimately you're going to formulate in a well-considered manner with your team, with your managers above you, ultimately with a key and clear medically appropriate aim, and then execute on that, well. Some people get bogged down in compliance, right? In my view, sometimes you'll hear people say, for an easy life, they'll pull yellow cards and red cards out about compliance a lot. And I would say 90% of the time, those compliance concerns are actually invalid. And they're usually invalid. It's usually for reasons of insecurity, of unfamiliarity, where people raise some of these concerns. But some of them are valid, and some of them absolutely need to be sanity checked as well. But that can be stifling if you want to develop your career. You've got to think about, is this ethically the right thing to do? Is this promotion in disguise? If it is, it's absolutely a no-no. Is there a benefit here to key people? Is this about furthering research? What are the aims and intentions? If you've got those things right, everything else falls into place. So that's why I said it comes down to ethics into law and ultimately translates into compliance, in my view. So when you have that type of mindset and mind frame, it helps you. Where a lot of people can put barriers up very quickly and say no, rather than listening, considering, and ultimately say, well, it's not the what we're doing here, it's the how we're going to do this, where the skill and diplomacy of a medical liaison lies, ultimately to make the difference in this being something which is a benefit and compliant for rules versus something which is not compliant and is ultimately got an untoward objective associated with it.
That's a brilliant answer. Thanks very much for that. Would you say that, again, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of sounded like one of the key messages that you were saying was that if you've been in, say, like a big pharma company for such a long time, where recipes, procedures are very, very stringent, that going from small pharma, then again, you're going to come across a situation where you have a bit more freedom, a bit more space to innovate. But the people that kind of don't get the most out of that, don't get the most for their career, are those who really kind of want to stick onto those processes, really kind of want to stick onto those procedures, rather than thinking why we're doing this and what's going on here. What about going the other way then? I mean, do you recommend that if someone's going from sort of medium to small pharma and they want the experience of working at a big pharma, or they got offered a promotion to work in a more senior position at a big pharma company, what are the challenges do you think they'll face, and what's going to hold them back from being successful then?
I think it's a very good point. I think then it's an adoption way. I think it's, you want to bring some ideas in, but you don't want to overwhelm the organization, that you come instantly from day one with 10 ideas, which can take a bit of time for people to digest. So I think it's playing the long game, the race, and bringing your ideas in a slow fashion, ultimately to drive change and shape the direction of that type of organisation. But it depends on the circumstances in which you're coming in. But that's what I would say. Have big farmers talk about, we want to bring in new ideas and new teams, and when they do, within months, they've seen it as either that's a stretch too far for us, and we'll close that type of process or ideas down, get dismissed very, very easily. But I think it's more about not the what, it's about the how, and the things that are done. Sometimes you just got, it takes time for big pharma ultimately to evolve and to change, whereas in small to medium companies, they need that ultimately to have that advantage and that edge, because they have less resource, and ultimately they need to have things go successfully and maybe in a quicker fashion.
Cool. Excellent answer. Thanks for that. Okay then, so take a look into your crystal ball. What do you think the future of your job role is, and how do you think the MSL role is going to evolve?
Very good question. For me, I think there's clear signs now of this happening, where medical liaisons came on board in and around pre-launch. That's in around 6-12 months before launch, and they were often misconstrued or sometimes misused as a primer to a promotional team, ultimately promoting a drug. I think that has changed, and I think it's changed in two ways. I think that awareness and familiarization of medicines is occurring much, much earlier than at launch. And that's one aspect. And I think medical liaisons are playing more of a key role, and I think that's only going to increase. Involved in phase 1 to phase 3 programs, but taking preclinical research from occurring. The other aspect is greater responsibility at launch for safety. I think there's an aspect of, okay, this was your trial experienced clinician and nurses, etc. Then ultimately it's familiarizing and educating in an appropriate way adoption of medicines, so that when they are used, they're used more safely and wisely. And ultimately that does things for the company, where it does help to keep their safety profile cleaner in terms of contraindications, cautionary points, etc. from the SMPC, because ultimately these things are monitored. So if people use them, and these adverse events are reported, then it gets factored in earlier. Safety signals get flagged earlier, which means that the medicine gets used more optimally and clears a path. So it develops the life cycle. Something which I mentioned is regarding facilitating research. MSLs do that quite a lot in some companies, but not in all. Okay. And I think an area where MSLs don't usually facilitate is in the preclinical space so much. With preclinical research, that's maybe not always falling in the MSL remit. Sometimes falls into business development. So I think there is becoming a business development aspect where medical liaisons are being involved with working with universities and academics who might have intellectual property, and ultimately medical liaisons might be identifying that, which might be a potential consideration for the company to partner and to synergize with. So that's an area where I see that evolving and developing from the diplomacy side of what an MSL does.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Okay, Lee, that brings us back to the end of our main questions. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into a little something called the quickfire round, where I don't know if you remember, but if you remember the series of Friends TV show, Phoebe used to play a game where she used to ask quick questions to try and get the truth out of people. So all we're going to do is ask a couple of quickfire questions about yourself, and then I'll ask one more final question for everyone to have a listen to. We'll get back to that then. All right, Lee, so are you ready for a quick fire round?
Far away.
Okay, let's go. Okay, Lee, here is our quick fire round. First question, favourite movie of all time?
Interview with a Vampire.
Any particular reason?
I just find it enchanting.
Fair enough, fair enough. Your most favourite holiday?
It would have to be Cyprus, just purely because of the all year round good weather, the people that I was with, the food, and the photographs.
Brilliant, brilliant. Any holidays to the Mediterranean, absolutely. Great place to go visit. What has been your most influential book in your career? It's
a book called The Magic of the Mind. It's by an author called Yul Stanley Anderson in the US. He formed part of what's known as the cybernetics movement in the 60s. But it's a lot which talks about, visualizing what you want to achieve, making you that you're not aware of everything, and the more you know, the better position that you are. You have to realize that we know very little at times. So it helps to humble you, and ultimately it's a terrifically well written book, and it's full of amazing advice. I was recommended that book by a very, very famous guitarist who's a huge hero of mine, and it's an inspirational book. Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, who was the guitarist?
The guitarist his name's Steve Vai. He's kind of a virtuoso electric guitar player. I think he played, obviously started out with Frank Zappa, but he played in Whitesnake and a few other various kind of hair bands of the late 80s and 90s. Showing my age now.
Steve Vai is a fantastic guitarist. And as you know, I'm well into my guitars as well. So brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And did you know Steve Vai then personally, or?
So in terms of Steve Vai, I think it was, 99. I saw him in concert in Manchester, and they managed to get in the venue for 3 hours while they were warming up.
Wow! So
I got some signed autographs and things, and then obviously, I think a few emails, a few exchanges. But he's someone I'm kind of passionate about. They say you should never meet your heroes, though, but he is a very nice guy.
Brilliant. And so, what was the book again, and what was the author?
It's called The Magic of the Mind. It's by Yul Stanley Anderson.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. What's your favourite song then of all time?
It would have to be. That's a difficult one. It would have to be a song by a band called Extreme called More Than Words, and that's purely because it was the song which made me want to learn guitar, and I played for my wife on our wedding day.
Wow, incredibly romantic. It's a beautiful song, one of my favourite. But wow, you must have been a fantastic wedding. Playing that song for your wife on your wedding day. Yeah, I can imagine that was absolutely beautiful. Such a great song. What's your favourite thing to do outside of work?
So ultimately, I've got a young family. I've got a son who's 6, and he's kind of crazy into martial arts and football right now.
Cool.
So I love spending time with my son. I also have a 9-week-old daughter, so which is just magical to relive those moments of them growing up. They grow up so fast. So that's where I'd say I really enjoy my time as a European director. I travel a lot to the US and obviously travel a lot around Europe in support of my team, etc. So I sometimes just love being home, just doing standard things, gardening, doing up old houses, which I've bought a couple of old houses, which I've been doing up as well. So yeah, I like doing things like that. But I have a dog as well, so there's always he always leaves stuff in the garden for me to clean up. So
Oh, that sounds lovely. Okay, then. So the final question I want to ask you, Lee, what is the final piece of advice you would give to any other MSL director out there who's watching this right now? What's the one thing that you would really want to tell them that could really help with their career?
I think you've got to your position because of your prior experience. Okay, that's got you to your present position, but that will not sustain you for the future. So I think continuing to keep an open mind to learn and to adapt is really important. So that's really important. I think the second thing is are you a manager? Are you a director? What do you want to be? Or do you want to be a leader? For me, I want to be a leader, and I think you lead people by having positive energy, and that people can clearly see that you're sympathetic, that you understand, that you've been through similar battles where your experience can help them. And ultimately, you have to bring people with you. So I think look around. Are people following you? Or are you a manager who dictates, who executes and commands, and is very isolated from that team? How do you feel your team might feel about you? Are they passionate about you? Are they with you? Do they respect you? If for someone to speak about you when you were not present, that was not maybe in a positive light, would they defend you? These kind of things I think are important to bear in mind, and always just try to be yourself and try to be as fair as you can be, but ultimately don't lose the passion and the reason for why you're there. You're there for key reasons why you got involved, and ultimately that's the patient for the good of men in developing new technology, new medicines, which is going to help. So I think it's keeping true to yourself, true to your roots, but learning new things. So that's where I would say is. You have to think about the future, and technology is evolving so fast. We have to stay up to date and move with it. Yesterday was not always the best. I've seen many managers which I've learned from through their mistakes. I think that's the key things that I've tried not to recapitulate those. But none of us are perfect, and we're all learning. And even I'm learning huge amounts by the day from my mentors and my colleagues. But that's what I believe would be the best advice.
That's absolutely brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Lee. Lee, it's been absolutely wonderful speaking with you today and learning everything that you've got to share and learning about yourself. I've definitely really enjoyed it. I just want to say to anyone out there, if you really enjoyed watching this video and you want to find out more, or you have any more questions, Lee, are people more than welcome to connect with you on LinkedIn and just drop you a question here and there? Would that be okay?
That would be absolutely fine. No problems at all.
Cool. So if you want to learn more, if there's anything Lee spoke about that you would like to just ask a question or two about, then just get in touch on LinkedIn. Likewise, you're more than welcome to connect with me, and I can try and pinpoint your question in the right direction as well. Thank you so much for watching. Please do like, share, subscribe, or comment in this video below. Once again, just thank you very much, Lee, for joining us, and thank you for everyone watching. All right, cheers. Thank you very much, Lee. Take care.
Take care. Bye.